Good morning. I'm Alexander Sterling. I'm the founder and CEO of Turtle Island Community Capital. We're an emerging native CDFI here in Rhode Island, but serving the entire Northeast. I'm going to take a minute at the beginning of this presentation to just breathe with everybody. I find it helps us to establish a new grounding, and we're going to be going through some kind of heavy stuff at the beginning of this presentation. So let's just get our nervous systems reset. Breathe in and hold and out. Now, I've only got like 12 minutes, so why did I spend 30 seconds of that going through and making everybody breathe together? Um, because we're going to jump through about 11,000 years of history in one slide, just like pretty much every website for every community represented here in the room today is going to do. Now, New England's institutional wealth is built on tribal land and indigenous resources. This is a blanket statement and an obvious statement, but what is it actually going to mean here? 20,000 years ago, maybe 30,000 years ago, human beings were here in the Americas. Right? The oldest discovered human settlements and human interaction areas are down at White Sands National Park, and they date to anywhere from 21 to 23,000 years old. Up here in the Northeast at Bullbrook, outside of Ipswich, Mass, we have a large community dating to about 11,000 years ago. For those who are watching this who are native, we know our history goes back further than that. But according to the archaeological surveys, this is one of the oldest city type settlements. Sorry, but I've got to do the thing that everybody does and jump forward about, I don't know, 12,800 years to bring us into the history of the colonies. In 1705, the Virginia colony enacted what was known as the first blood quantum laws. Now, blood quantum is something that will be very familiar to those of us who are in Indigenous spaces. And to those who aren't, prepare to encounter some very ugly racial truths about America. The current rough population in the 2020 census for Native Americans puts us at around 1.8 to 3% of the total population. Why the spread? It's because some folks are listing as Native only, some folks are listing as 2 or more races containing Indigenous blood. Not all of those folks are what are called enrolled members of either a federally or state recognized tribe. Federal recognition is the process by which tribes are allotted reservation land, access to resources, or recognition by the federal government. The federal government does, in fact, have a vested interest in making sure that very few people actually get that. And thanks to a little thing called scarcity mindset, the federally recognized tribes themselves are running into a situation where blood quantum is determining whether or not people get to count as part of their tribes. That 1705 law that said that basically if you had any slave or any African blood in you, no matter how small a percentage, you counted as African. If you dropped below 50% Indian blood, native blood, you no longer counted as Native American. Clip forward 300 years, and all of a sudden we look at that 2020 census with a little bit more skepticism. 3% of the country being based on, well, a lot of historical erasure means that we might actually be a lot higher. In 1830, we got the Indian Removal Act, right? This was the Trail of Tears, and I'm sure lots of people are familiar with it. The Dawes Act in 1887 was sort of the 1-2 punch on this. Massachusetts Senator Henry Dawes sponsored and championed the bill. And it was a way for the United States government to solve what it saw as its Indian problem. The Indian problem mostly being there were still Indians. In order to move folks out of the East Coast and out of the colonies, the Indian Removal Act allowed Andrew Jackson to negotiate the removal of Native Americans to the west of the Mississippi River, to the thing called Indian Country. The Dawes Act then split a ton of that land out of federal trust and out of reservation land and into what's called fee simple. So we already go from huge reservations and amounts of land down to smaller reservations and amounts of land. And then 90 million more acres of that were stolen. Yeah, that's a lot. But where are we now? This was in July of 2025. This is an official post, thank you, from the Department of Homeland Security. That painting by John Gast is a direct representation of westward expansion and what was called Manifest Destiny. For those of you who, like me, were art history nerds, you can see the balance of light and darkness, which in this case is showing the progress of civilization across the country. The figure, Columbia, the spirit of America, as it were, is bringing the telegraph line, stagecoaches, modern education, and the American way of life. And down in that bottom left corner, you can see that the beings cast out and driven before her are native. Now, today we're dealing with several polycrises, and one of them that we can talk about very directly is the impact of that westward expansion, manifest destiny, and colonial history on the indigenous economy here in the United States and in North America. 24% of Native American, Native Hawaiian respondents to a study done by the US Department of Treasury said that business loans were pretty much impossible to get. So a quarter of all innovation and all businesses started by Native American or Native Hawaiian folks are unable to get funding. Almost a quarter of Native children born right here in Rhode Island, where I am based, are born to mothers without a high school diploma. And we know that historically, the causes of that are things like people needing to go to work, needing to get jobs, needing to support families. And 44% of Native Americans in Massachusetts, our neighbor to the north and east, have a high school degree or less. We know that high school dropouts are more likely to end up in bad situations, right? So if we're talking about almost half of Native Americans up in Massachusetts and a quarter down here in Rhode Island, that's a lot. Now, the government has recognized this historically. I'm not talking about our current government, which seems to be doing everything it can to unrecognize everything. But historically, Treasury has made available this thing called the NACA programs, the Native American CDFI Assistance Program, which, in response to a study that they did, showcased that Native communities, for reasons we've just gone over, face historical exclusionary impediments to investment and to investability. The NACA program helps to build up those Native communities by providing investment opportunity and stability. And a lot of the, like USDA Rural, the Education, Indian Health Services, Economic Development, all have tribal carve-outs, traditionally like 2%, to support Native communities by making sure that some of that funding is able to go directly to them. Right now, all of those programs are getting gutted. So that's where we come in. Uh, Turtle Island Community Capital is a mission-driven financial institution. Our one goal is to make equitable access to capital available to the Native communities right here in the Northeast. We grew out of my personal desire to come home. I grew up here in Rhode Island. I love the Northeast, and my tribe is based down right outside of New York City. The Ramapo Munsee Lenape have been denizens of Lenapehoking and of the region around Bear Mountain for time immemorial. New York City is an area where all of the money in the world passes through. And my community, right outside of it, hasn't had anybody to help bring access to that capital for longer than I've been alive. You'll see on this map those 3 red dots. Those are the headquarter locations of the other Native CDFIs in the region. We've got our good friends, Four Directions Development Corporation up in the north, up in Maine, Seneca Nation Economic Development Corporation out in the west and the far end of New York, and Sequoia Fund down in North Carolina. Each of those are tribally chartered. And what that means is that they are built to support just their tribal citizens. Turtle Island Community Capital is not. We are built to be able to support any tribal citizens and any other tribes in the area. By building out our programs to be culturally responsive, culturally competent, trauma-informed, we're able to work with folks to make sure that they're getting out of those predatory debt cycles that folks in poverty and underinvestment tend to end up in. You know, if somebody calls you up and says, hey, you can get this loan at only 1%, no questions asked, and you're a small business owner who can't get any money from the banks or anybody else, you start to consider it. What you don't consider is that it's 1% per month and it compounds, and that all of a sudden you're losing money faster than you're making it. So in partnership with others, including Jump Scale and building out our first fires fund for capitalization, we're working to make sure that these communities that have historically had very limited access to capital resources can get it. Our first fires fund has a pretty specific investment focus, right? Like we're looking for startups, clean energy infrastructure, native indigenous enterprises, whether we're building out food, energy, or water sovereignty for tribal partners, we want to make sure that they're getting to the place of sustainability. And we believe that by starting from a place of good sustainable investment, we can get to good sustainable community. Our geography, as you can see here, it's like we are based in Rhode Island. As I just said, my tribe is based outside of New York. And so we hit Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, all the way down to DC. We just had some outreach from some folks down in Virginia. So we would love to be looking at continuing to support community wherever it needs us. Now, where does philanthropy step in, right? So we talked about the needs of the community. We talked about the history of government access. Where does community investment, specifically from the philanthropic and foundation community, come together? Well, historically, Native-led and Native-serving organizations are getting less than 0.5% of philanthropic investment. And a new study by Candid, First Nations Development Institute, and Native Ways Federation discovered that less than 0.5% is actually getting somewhat inflated by things like native species, Indian river, indigenous plants, which means that we're actually not even getting that 0.4%. We might be getting 0.25%. So native-focused philanthropic portfolios are just not coming to the top, and we need to be. especially with those federal grant programs going away, and especially with the historical access to capital, that a lot of our communities who are based in land, based in these places, haven't been able to get access to. This quote here at the bottom, just a direct one, right? Indigenous intermediaries like TICC, Four Directions, who you'll be hearing from later, and others, are crucial to overcoming those asymmetries between impact investors in Native America. Why? Well, for one thing, because that trust doesn't exist. When we're talking about working in communities of exploitation, when we're talking about working in communities of desire, of need, there is sometimes this push to overproduce solutions. And what those communities actually need is for somebody to listen to them. And that's what our organizations are designed to do. We're about to hear from Nikki Foster from the Northwest Area Foundation. This very handy-dandy graphic shows basically what happens when foundations invest in their native CDFIs. In the Northwest Area Foundation footprint, 73% of their CDFIs have a current capitalization plan, compared to 27% outside of it. Why? Funding. Same thing with the strategic plan. It's less dramatic, but like the numbers are right there. If you fund it, they will do it. And if you do it, then you will succeed. This is a really important one. If CDFIs aren't able to access debt capital, they can't lend debt capital. And so if they don't have a foundation backing them up to make sure that they've got their balance sheet balanced and they've got the extra money that they can hang on to in order to weather some of those storms, they can't access the debt capital that allows them to capitalize the projects that allow them to stabilize the communities. If you're interested in being one of those foundation partners for us and for Native New England, here are some ways you can do it. And we can either take in donations and grants through our fiscal sponsor. We're looking at PRIs and EQ2 investments for the close of 25 and beginning of 2026, and then connecting us to other online donors. Thanks. I appreciate it. This meeting is being recorded. From Northwest Area Foundation, who is joining us from vacation, very dedicated. And I will stop my screen share so that you can take it over.
Great. Thank you so much, Alexander. It was a great setup. So I'm going to share my screen and I'll get started here. I will be very happy. It'll be a huge vacation success if I can share my screen successfully. There we go. Look all good? All right, I got the thumbs up from Travis. I'm good. All right. Well, as Alexander said, I'm Nikki Foster. I'm a program officer at Northwest Area Foundation, which is actually located in St. Paul, Minnesota. That's our headquarters. So oftentimes I'll get on the phone with folks and they think I'm in Seattle or Portland, which is fair because you don't really think of Minnesota as Northwest, but there's some history there that I'll get into. So really briefly, Northwest Area Foundation is a private independent foundation, been around since 1934. And this beautiful artwork that you see on the screen is actually in our lobby. We worked with a local arts nonprofit to represent our region in that didn't always doesn't have a map on it, right? Which we often think of with our place-based investing, but shows sort of the entrance to Pine Ridge Reservation, which is in our region, has the number 76 at the top there, which will all make sense to you in just a moment. So at Northwest Area Foundation, our mission, which has changed in the last 2 years, is that we stand alongside change makers in our region of 8 states and 76 Native nations and fund work that leads to racial, social, and economic justice. The vision of the foundation is that the people of our priority communities, which includes Native Americans, people of color, people in rural areas, refugees, and immigrants, thrive on their own terms, and that our grantee partners work with their communities to reimagine and restructure unjust systems to serve, support, and heal people and communities. So this is really a shift and based on a lot of learnings and lessons that we have from our grant partners and organizations that we've been so honored to work with. And we really are just so privileged to stand alongside organizations that are leading with courage and wisdom and vision and advancing long overdue changes in deep connection with the land they inhabit and the communities that they serve. And really thinking about how self-determination builds power of people and communities to liberate themselves from the policies, practices, and beliefs designed to disadvantage them. All of the things in the history that Alex was talking about, really how to free themselves from that work. Um, I am going to touch on. Uh, I'll go into a little bit more of the foundation and its history, but one of the things that I have learned, I've been at the foundation for 12 years, and I've really come to learn that how we do our work is so much more important than what we do. And so I thought I would run through the values that ground all of our work. And I know organizational values are publicized a lot and talked about, but it hopefully will set some context for how we think about this work. So, really, listening and learning for change, we just anchor our practice in having open hearts and minds to question our own worldviews and really focus on the change and adapt continually to our own practices as philanthropy and put those learnings into practice. It's listening. You know, I love to listen. I love to listen to people's stories, but I have to take that in and then make sure that it's activated, right? That really shows, again, a commitment to the second value, which is that grantees come first. That our mission as a foundation is intertwined extremely closely with the success of our grantees. We need to be less prescriptive, honor the work that's been going on for decades. I mean, this is really, I mean, the thousands of years Alexander touched on, right? That a lot of this is in communities already. And so, how do we do that in a way that centers our grantees? Social justice is a value, right? That we have an active commitment to confront racism, sexism, colonization, and other overlapping oppressions. And that's really key to our strategy to help, build power and self-determination, deconstruct and unlearn some of the things that were placed upon all of us through colonization and other ways. Um, and then really sort of thinking through how to act with courage. And I think about this in this conversation. We had a grant partner in 2020 really call on our board and us as staff to think of philanthropy as a place where we can be truth tellers, right? And to talk about these things in really courageous and explicit ways, to build trust. And I have really grown to find that when trust is earned, when it's honored, and then sustained, that is what frees people up to dream really big and have these amazing vision comes to life. But you have to cultivate that and foster that, and that's an ongoing thing. It's not like, oh, I earned your trust and we're done. I mean, this is a long-term piece. And then also just showing up with empathy, purpose, and hope, and using heart. And I'm a heart. I think I'm a heart first person, so I love that we have that centered in our values. And if you go to our website and find my bio, there's a number of blogs that I've written, and one of them is about being called a bleeding heart as almost as if that was an insult, right? But no, in this work, we're really putting that and centering that heart, and it's been very important to build that into our work with priority communities and Native communities, especially. And I will just share with you that one of the partners I worked for a long time with, when I shared the values with her and had the heart piece, she's from Pine Ridge, and she's like, "Well, it's about time. It's about time." Heart was in this work, and when you look at the definition of philanthropy in and of itself as a love for humanity, right? Like, how are we not centering that as foundations and funders? So this shows the eight the colonial boundaries of the 8 states that we work with, and you'll see that there are a number of large land-based reservations. I'm just setting this as some context for the work that I'll share with you. It's a tremendously diverse region, tremendously diverse cultures among the 76 Native nations. I mean, forestry and plains-based reservations, and a lot of ranching and all of those things. And I also want to touch on the importance of recognizing Native populations in urban areas and other parts of our region because of policies around relocation and those kinds of things. We have large urban Native populations in Seattle and Minneapolis, the heart of the American Indian movement. And so our work touches on all of those areas. And this just shows, that sort of the forcible nature of colonization taking the land from Indigenous peoples. And just one interesting fact that I found in getting ready is that 14% of the agricultural land on reservations is under Native control. Only 14%. Right. I mean, this is like where some of the power and that needs to shift. Even if it's on a reservation, doesn't necessarily mean there's Native control on those places. Okay. Here's the I didn't mean to bury the lead, but how we support Native communities as Northwest Area Foundation. Since the early 2000s, we had about 30% of our grant dollars every year going to Native communities, but it was a little quiet. We weren't really as explicit about it. And in 2012, we made this public commitment that every year, 40% of our grant dollars will go to Native-led organizations. We are very explicit in that definition. We track that definition meticulously. We don't give grants to non-Native organizations to help Native communities or study Native communities. We fund organizations led by and for Native people and serving Native communities in self-determined ways. So this shows that for about 10 years, that's 87.7 million invested in grant dollars in Native-led organizations from our work. And it's really been just transformative work happening that I just really encourage you to support. I mean, this is support for connection to land, cultures, languages, ways of life, Native nonprofits that are doing amazing work, and Native CDFIs. I mean, we have done a lot of support to Native CDFIs through project grants and capacity building, general operating dollars, program-related investments to capitalize loan funds, just really a range of supports that, like, as Alexander was showing, like, as you build that up, it really fortifies those organizations. In our region, we have about at least a third of all Native CDFIs in those eight states. In addition to, we're proud to say, on behalf of the Oglala Lakota people, that the very first Native CDFI originated in Pine Ridge in our region. So just a long history of that work. I'm going to skip over this. I wanted to touch on I wanted to show how we've evolved since making this public commitment to Indian country in terms of really learning the importance of letting communities lead on this work. We used to have really two, determined priority outcomes, and it just wasn't there just wasn't the sustainability and the momentum that we're starting to feel now as we've opened that up to be a much more holistic definition and a less colonized definition around wealth building and economic prosperity. And really the biggest point I want to make is the solutions are there in communities. Our role as funders is to resource those solutions, champion them, and get out of the way. There just has to be that trust. It's like I said earlier, it just really opens up everyone. It's not to say that we don't stand by the change makers. It's just the importance of recognizing those solutions are there, and we as philanthropy need to assess that. So this is a part of our theory of change. You'll see again those values leading it, our priority communities, and then really thinking about how justice is advanced. And it's looking at systemic causes, self-determination and power, the importance of healing, all of those things. But I would also say it's around, if we're talking about helping organizations restructure and reimagine systems, we have to recognize that philanthropy is a part of that, right? Our wealth at Northwest Area Foundation comes from the railroad that was started in St. Paul. That was kind of like where it originated and went out west to all the states that you saw in our region. And it was extractive of land and people and resources. And how do we think about philanthropy in a way to start the reparative work that's going to get us to justice for everyone, and especially the priority communities that we serve? We've done a lot of work internally, learning about what the railroad did, sort of the history of that railroad. It's so important to look back on that history in order to move forward. And it really fuels our work to take that 5% and do the grant making, but then look at our endowments and use those dollars for other impact investing. And we doubled our grants budget in 2025 in recognition of the times that we're in, the uncertainty that our grant partners are. Whoops, my timer's going off, Travis. I got my. And so I'll just end there. That there's so many ways that philanthropy can show up during these times. It's the financial resources, but it's also the support of people, that strategic communications, using our voice as philanthropy to stand up during these difficult times. And so I really welcome questions, further conversation, and I'm going to stop sharing and feel really like I achieved it today on this vacation day. Thank you all for listening. It's been great to be with you, and I'll turn it back over to Travis.
Thank you, Nikki. It's so wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining us from your vacation. And I loved Alex's introduction, and what a decade of investment by a foundation like Northwest Area can mean for the institutions in that region. So thank you. And hopefully we're going to be replicating some of that work here in New England. And so for the last half of our sharing, which we will wrap in about 25 minutes, we're going to hear from both Thomas Mitchell, who's at the Sewell Foundation in Maine, and Sarah Woog from Four Directions Development Corporation, who's been leading this work for 20 years, making capital available in Maine. So look forward to this little New England case study, and then we'll again open up for conversations and questions. I think, Thomas, you're going to go first. Is that correct?
That's right. Thanks,
All
Travis.
right. Thank you, Thomas.
I share my screen here, and yeah, I want to start by saying thanks to Travis and Alexander for pulling this together and inviting me. And I'm glad to kind of be with you all and sharing a little bit about the Sewell Foundation. And I'm going to be kind of quick here and pass it to Sarah, because I'm excited to hear what she has to say, like I'm sure all of you are too. But like Travis said, the Sewell Foundation is based in and does all of our grant making in what is now Maine. So I'll tell you a little bit about us and some of our history, and then get into how we work and what our investments look like, which is my role with the Sewell Foundation, and one piece of our interactions with Four Directions. So there's a few things I kind of want to highlight about the way Sewell works, and just like Nikki said, we think about this in terms of how we do our work as much as we do what exactly that work is. And so we're very much focused on leading with our values and what our relationships are with our grantees and other partners. And a lot of that is rooted in building relationship and making grants that allow our grantees to do what they want to do and have us get out of the way, like Nikki said. There's a few things I would just highlight here from our approach. And the first piece is up at the top where, it says organizations led by Black, Indigenous, people of color, rural Mainers, and women are resourced to advance their mission. That really reflects a similar sentiment to what Nikki was saying. It's not just about serving those folks, it's about leadership and control of those resources and shifting power to those communities for us. The second piece I would highlight is around resourcing, where we look at all of our resources, not just grants, even though grants are the biggest piece of that, but also to our investments, to our staff, to the relationships we have as tools that we can apply to moving things forward. And over the years, the investment piece of that has grown, but it's grown alongside that other support beyond the grant as well, where we apply a lot of time and attention and resources to providing wraparound opportunities to our grantees that that help them do their work better, informed by what needs they see and what opportunities are out there. And the last thing I would just highlight from this is this statement that change requires bold and consistent action. We're really oriented around doing things, applying this, making this real in the world and in what our work is, rather than just a pretty picture, which it also is a pretty picture. And so for us, that means deploying investments, to Travis's point earlier, increasing our payout. So, in this current year, always a moving target, but we expect to pay out something like 11 or 12% of our assets. And we've done that pretty consistently over the past 5 years or more. And when we think about that question for us, it's really leading with what we feel is our responsibility to meet the needs of our grantee partners. And everything else is downstream of that to some extent. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit on one of our grant-making program areas, our Wabanaki Communities grant-making, and tell you a little bit about this. I'll start by saying I'm the wrong person to tell you the most about this. That would be Sonia, our lead for this work. But I do want to highlight a few things, some of which I've already said, which is that this program area is really focused around work that is both led by and serving Wabanaki communities and tribes, and includes both Native-led organizations, but also tribal governments directly in this grant-making work. And to some of Alex's point earlier, sort of the center of a lot of this is around sovereignty. And what we consistently hear is sort of the biggest focus for our grantee partners. In terms of the numbers, in 2025, 1.8 million, about 13% of our total grants budget goes into this program area. But I would not want to leave out how much we view all of this work as interconnected and interrelated. So across a variety of our program areas, whether it's our work in food systems or our sort of even more place-specific program areas in the Katahdin region and in Washington County, there's a lot of overlaps and interconnections between the grantees and the work that's going on in those various places. And before I move on, I highlight these photos a little bit. Some of our grantees here. The first one is WAYS, Wabanaki Youth in Science, one of our grantees and some of their programming. And then down below, you'll see a piece of land that was purchased by Nuiskak as a Native-led organization, where I'm happy to say we did not make a loan to help them purchase that land because they raised all the money themselves and didn't need it. To say a little bit more about kind of our investing and how we got there, the Sewell Foundation has had this aspiration to do impact investing for probably over a decade now, with not a lot of specificity during some of that time about what that meant to us and what our focus was going to be. And I put this sort of spectrum chart up here, which is similar to the one that Travis showed at the beginning, just to situate how we think about this investing, where we call the whole scope of it values aligned investing, what we're trying to do. We do have a goal to move our entire set of assets to quote unquote values alignment. But most importantly to me, and for this conversation, is a set aside of $18 million of our assets to be invested directly in projects, businesses, and organizations in Maine to advance our mission in Maine. And that's that sort of almost farthest to the right piece of it, because thinking about a full spectrum of capital, we also include grants on this spectrum too. And really the primary things that we're focused on, again, similar to our work in grant making, on the investing side, we're looking for investments that don't just serve the communities we're working for and with, but that are led by them and build wealth and power, and allow us to transfer decision making over those assets closer to the communities that are most impacted by them. And I would say the other sort of big factor for us in this investing is really finding where the unique flexibility of our capital makes a difference. I often shorthand and say, we're not out there to compete with Four Directions to make a loan. We're out there to find ways to make new projects happen, leverage other capital into a transaction. And so those are really the two things that we're most focused on when we're evaluating investment opportunities for us. So today we've deployed just over 10 million of that $18 million commitment, and are hoping to do the rest of it by 2028. So if you've got an investment idea, I'm your guy. I'd be remiss if I didn't put the pitch out there. And I just want to end here by saying a little bit about kind of Sewell and Four Directions. Over time, Four Directions has been a grantee partner of the Sewell Foundation since 2012, over a decade now, and a big, I think, feature, especially in recent years, of that grant making, and Sarah can say more about this, but has been about the flexibility of that capital, general operating support, multi-year grant making, but also even when it's project-based funding for particular work that Four Directions is doing, making sure that Four Directions has the flexibility to apply those funds in unique ways as they need to, that they're seeing that we might not think of. And then I would just also highlight that, we're co-lenders on one project right now that you see a photo of, which is a mill site cleanup in Millinocket, Maine here. And yeah, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Thomas. It is wonderful to partner with you today and in general. Thomas and I got to connect earlier today and, spitballed some exciting ideas. So also thank you to Travis and to Alex and to Nikki. It's been a really great group to get together. When I saw Nikki speak at the OESA conference, I was like, I want to spend more time with her, and I didn't know I'd be able to. So, and Travis, I'm really excited to continue to engage in your work. And Alex, I know you'll be calling me all the time, so we're good. So thank you to my friends on this call, and thank you for all you for joining us and showing your interest in the work that we do, that I'm really excited to share. I kind of use slides as to rein myself in, but that's basically it. So I'm just going to tell you about our work. I'm going to try to highlight some cool opportunities that we have with Sewell at the moment, and want to make sure that I give space at the end to make sure that we can answer the questions that you guys have about the things that we've shared today. So I work at Four Directions Development Corporation. We are a native CDFI in Maine. We have existed since 2001, I believe. I have had the pleasure of being with Four Directions for 2.5 years now. I came from a career in education. I was a math teacher for a long time and did stepped into administration, some higher ed work. And I always like to share the story where when I was trying to understand what my future could hold and I was in college, I did an internship at AIG and I was just like, never again. I'm not doing the corporate thing. I can't do it. And I love math and I love playing with these things and And then like when I discovered Four Directions and I had like I felt I came home moment when I went to the Opportunity Finance Network conference. I was like, it's finance with a soul. I feel so connected to this field. And I'm really excited to be sharing it with you all today. In particular, native CDFIs are really cool because part of our certification, part of what's required to be a native CDFI is that we are native led, and that consists of executive leadership and our board. And honestly, I'm on another board right now, and like I think that that model is really important to import in all nonprofit spaces, so that we acknowledge the importance of the communities being served speak for themselves, basically. So I'm really proud to exist in this space for a couple different reasons. And Four Directions, we do some really, really cool things. So I said that we were founded in 2001. We serve the Wabanaki tribes in Maine, Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy. Passamaquoddy have two communities in Indian Township and in Zibayag at Pleasant Point. So we serve 5 communities, 4 tribes. And we were founded initially in response to challenges around residential lending. Traditional banks can lend on tribal lands and historically have not. It is challenging. There are challenges associated with it because of the trust system. And so basically, if you can't have lending capital, if you cannot access lending capital for residential lending, then the idea of home ownership as a wealth building opportunity doesn't exist because you only have a cash market. So, I have seen homes sold for $20,000 before because of this conundrum or challenge. And then the other challenge around that is that investing in a home isn't investing in a home because there's no investment. So anything that you need to keep your house safe and healthy, there are no returns on it. It's just money thrown away. I mean, it's important to do, but there are no returns. So it's really detrimental that that situation is a reality. And for any Native folks on tribal lands who don't have access to a CDFI, that continues to be a reality. So Four Directions was founded in response to this. Really proud that there are significant housing markets in the communities now, and that families are accessing home ownership in their communities as a way to establish intergenerational wealth and an investment for their family. So since then, we've done a lot of other things too. We do let's see what's next. Okay, I'm gonna skip this one. So since then, we've done a lot of other things too. We have a small business program that helps folks access smaller lending capital, generally under $100,000, to scale up their small business that exists or to start something, to turn a gig into something that can help sustain their families. We also have a really cool artisan program where artisans apply for up to $2,000 in grant dollars and get access to our small business resources as well if they want help with like website development and increase their exposure. We do that. And we also provide them with up to $2,000 to meet the needs that they currently have. It might be for supplies. I know that one person was able to go to the Native American market in New Mexico with the grant that we were able to provide and increase his visibility nationally. So really proud of the artisan program that we have. Residential lending, I reviewed briefly. So financial counseling, our executive director, Matt Lewis, I really like him and admire him. We're really close and really enjoy working together. And if he was doing this right now, he'd say that's our special sauce, which I don't really use that word, but I'm going to evoke Matt right now. Because the cool thing about CDFIs is that we exist because traditional banks refused to provide access to capital to risky communities, which isn't a thing. That's not a truth. And CDFIs have lower default rates than traditional banks. And it's because we are led by the communities we serve. It's because we provide the programming necessary to support people in achieving what they hope to instead of predating on their hopes for their families, really. And financial counseling and financial capabilities programming is really where it's at. So folks come to Four Directions, they want to get a house, they want to get a loan, they want to repair their credit, they're curious about maybe rehabbing their house. And they work with us initially to understand what taking on debt looks like, to get them prepared to do so, and to really create a relationship with Four Directions that when like if there are challenges in our lending relationship moving forward, that they actually want to like talk to us and like we can be a supportive entity rather than kind of a looming cloud. So financial counseling capabilities is really where it's at, I think, in CDFIs generally, and we definitely see that at Four Directions as a key to our success. And then we also do community development. So we work with tribal leadership to support the development of various tribal entities. We have this really cool hatchery that we're working with Mi'kmaq Nation on that to increase the production. And that's really part of like a food sovereignty movement. They feed their people with it. There's Mi'kmaq farms that we've supported too. And we do a lot under community development with what we call initiatives. So these are like core programs. And then we also pride ourselves. I've heard a lot in different contexts of CDFIs being financial first responders. So like that we are reactive to the current needs in a way that is like more nimble, more effective, more efficient than an institution that is not led by the communities they serve or does not have the 20+ year history that we have in working with the tribes and with tribal citizens. So I'm going to get into that momentarily. Want to, show you how cool we are for a minute. This is our impact slide that updates this monthly. So our impact to date, I mean, this is over $20 million that would not have otherwise been accessible to Abenaki people and communities without this 20-year go that Four Directions has had. And I don't know if Susan Hammond's on the call, but she's our founding director, and I'm really proud to be working at an organization that she started that has this kind of impact. We also do free tax preparations for community members. And that's really important too, because Alex, we'll have to do another webinar about how like Maine and like settlement stuff. But anyway, the tribes in Maine do not have access to the federal protections that they have been guaranteed access to because of the state of Maine. And so therefore piecemeal every legislative session, there are negotiations around legislation that helps increase access to certain protections. And tax law and tax spec stuff can be part of it, but it changes all the time because of state legislation that has an impact on this. So like having a native-led organization doing that kind of work with tribal citizens ensures that we can maximize the impact of that kind of tax legislation that like H&R Block or whatever, that is not part of the normal training for another tax preparer. And we do all that free. I do want to highlight where the bullet around Wabanaki level formal outreach programs. So like I'm talking about all the cool stuff we do. It's not because like Sarah decided we should, or even Matt, or even our board. We do annual reviews and surveys on the ground in our communities, and we meet regularly with tribal leadership. And we also host housing summits where all the housing directors come together to talk about their current needs. So I think I highlight before financial capabilities and counseling as a critical part of our work, but I would also like to highlight that our informed decision making is directly from what the communities want from themselves. And I think that that kind of agrees, I think the foundation speaking on this call today is saying like that was a really important transition for them to make, that it's like decision making, the things that happen on the ground, what needs are, does not come from an external source placing their westernized values on these sovereign nations and systems. It's really what people, communities, tribal leadership, elected leadership want for themselves. And this is some outputs from our survey and conversations, but I think I will talk. I'm going to get to in a couple slides, or maybe the next one, Wabanaki level tribal-wide initiative interest, because the initiatives are really cool. And I think in this conversation, it's important to talk about how foundations support private capital and allows organizations to be nimble and responsive in a way that other sources of capital do not. And the initiatives that we do at Four Directions are really a testament to that. Okay, so Wabanaki Consortium. This is really exciting. This is a big project. So basically, the tribes are all their own economic development entities, drivers, decide what they want to do to increase access to resources for their people. And there is, in that paradigm, there is a missed opportunity because there's power in numbers, there's power in branding, and the idea of a Wabanaki-wide economic development entity is really cool idea, and like the chiefs want it, and we've been working regularly to go for it. So we currently have an EDA grant. The EDA sponsors SEDS development work, comprehensive economic development strategy. And so I'm going to try not to talk about this too long, but the EDA structures are geographical, right? So like in Maine, we have EMDC, Eastern Maine Development Council, NMDC, Northern Maine, and it's saying Maine exists in these geographic regions and they all have common interests and values when it comes to economic development. And tribes exist in geographic regions as defined. And do they have aligned economic interests and values with the communities that surround them? I would argue that's up for them to say, and I see a lot of evidence that says no, right? I mean, especially when it comes to like bringing in money, like tribes want to bring in money to provide services to their people, but in the form of things other than taxation, because they can have their own capital generating entities. So the structures are very different. We could probably get into another conversation about like values and purpose too. But that's the EDA construct, right? So it places tribes in these things and saying this is important to them, and it just does not honor sovereignty, and it's not like that does not comport with reality. So we were able to recently say, hey, EDA, Wabanaki wide is where it's at. It's not geographical. It is what is the collective interest of the tribes in Maine. And so we did it. We're doing the SEDS now. We're doing the first Wabanaki wide comprehensive economic development strategy, and that is going to turn into the strategic plan for the Wabanaki Consortium, which is going to be the economic development driver that can hold a Wabanaki-wide tourism bureau, if that's what it is, that can hold decision-making around, like we have Made in Maine, like what's it mean to really be made by, like, Wabanaki made, right? You can do a branding system with it. I'm not going to find what the things are. We're working on the sets, and that's informed by the tribal leadership and communities, but there's like really expansive opportunities here. Where Sewell comes in is like, to do this, we need to host Chiefs dinners, right? EDA is not going to pay for our Chiefs dinner. Our Sewell funding does. We need to honor the fact that chiefs are leaders of sovereign nations and don't donate their time, right? They are running sovereign nations with health centers, schools, housing departments, environmental departments. And for us to say, hey, come here, make sure you can come to Bangor for 4 hours so that we can do this Wabanaki wide thing, and they're like, hey, I'm spending time making sure that we find the doctor that we need for our health center. Those are like two different things, right? So part of the money that Sewell has as part of our application in our grant with Sewell and that we've received is that we provide compensation to the tribes to have the capacity to engage in this work, because that's what we have found is a crucial gap. And then the other thing is with federal funding, and it's going to get worse because the CDFI, the NACA program, we might have to start matching too. But like match is a very challenging thing to do in these spaces with federal grants, and Sewell money is very commonly our match when we do work with federal grants. So I think that the EDA requires a 20 or 25% match, and that has been where Sewell has come in with that support as well. The other thing is Sewell timelines. Sewell has done a really good job at not just doing 1 year grants. We do 2, and then we meet and say, do we need an extension? It's just really the relationship and the way that Sewell looks at the projects that we do together is really at the forefront, is honoring tribal sovereignty, is honoring the time and deliberation that needs to take place in order for like really important stuff to happen, and honor the fact that the tribes in partnership with Four Directions should be defining those things. And then I'm going to give another example about what Four Directions does with initiatives is like, so in the pre-COVID landscape, I mean, I lived in Washington County. Anybody who didn't live in a bubble kind of knew that digital equity was a challenge, right? But then like everybody else discovered it in COVID. And so all this broadband dollars started become available so that rural areas could address these challenges. But like people didn't have broadband offices. They didn't have infrastructure specialists to understand what was required to increase access. So when those opportunities come up and there needs to be people on the ground nimble enough to seize those opportunities, and it's not contained in the tribal communities yet. Four Directions will work with the tribe, say, hey, do you guys all want to go in on this? And we'll manage the grant application. We'll do the grant. We'll work with another organization to get the digital navigators. We hired a broadband specialist who did the infrastructure reviews for the tribes. So we have the ability to step in and create capacity when it's needed in order to be responsive to a unique or new opportunity.
1 minute warning, Sarah.
Thank you, Travis. Bring that. I think I'm doing pretty well here, though. Yeah, I am. This is all the other cool stuff that we want to do. Talk about that another time. And our ED before Matt, Charlene Virgilio, kind of coined this term ecolistic, well, you guys can read this, but it's kind of like, well, Nikki definitely brought this up. This is definitely part of Thomas' conversation. There's so many things that contribute to, tribal sovereignty is a thing. I don't want to say like making it happen or anything. Like it is a thing. Like it's fully realizing given the constraints of this capitalistic American weird Maine system. And that's kind of like our multiple pronged approach in our work in supporting tribes in the full realization of economic sovereignty. There we go, Woolly one.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's exciting to see the work that you're doing, and I have so many questions about Maine, but I will set those aside for the moment and would welcome others to come off of mute, or if you would rather type your questions into the chat, pose them to the presenters. And while you're doing that, I do have a very quick first question for Sarah. And my understanding, and I should have prepared you for this, Sarah, is that CDFIs pull their capital from a number of sources, right? Equity that you've raised, CRA dollars from other banks, philanthropic investments that you do pay back, but you pay back over time. Can you give us a sense of what that capital makeup looks like for Four Directions? If roughly percentages, where does your capital come from?
I'm gonna fill with percentages, but
Okay.
I'll be really good at giving you a long-winded answer.
Okay.
So private capital, like the CDFI fund historically has like that's where we get a lot of lending capital, operational. Um, okay, sorry. Operational funding comes with that very often. That landscape is weird for the first time in a long time or ever. We have not pursued the CDFI awards. Fortunately been around for a while, so we have that security. So I would say for folks on the call, trying to that is going to be a deficit for folks within like now and within the next 5 years, because it's going to take a long time to really retain access to that resource is that's my viewpoint. So CDFI fund for sure, which is part of the federal treasury. Private capital, I did, and then I would say maybe 20, no, probably more than that. 40% of our project support right now could be private, but I'm like making that up. I could be wrong. Because the CDFI fund is mostly lending capital. Most of our lending capital does come from that. We also have EQ2s with banks. I think we have borrowed from Sewell before. In our founding, when we needed lending capital, our founding director with a wonderful consultant, they did a campaign with religious institutions who we still have lending capital with, who really showed up about 20 years ago or so in that space. The state, we are careful with our relationship with the state because we don't want to be a token to say that they're doing the things that they should be doing. And we have niche partnerships that are great. Well, we have a great partnership with Maine Office of, I don't want to say niche, but like we're cognizant of not letting the state pretend they're doing what they need to do. But our relationship with the Maine Office of Tourism has really is the primary funder in a significant way of our Wabanaki Cultural Tourism Initiative, which might become the Tourism Bureau under the Wabanaki Consortium that I was talking about. And that's a wonderful partnership because they bring a lot of like there's a lot of reciprocal sharing of expertise in our different spaces. So that's not just a funding partnership, but the funding is significant. So federal, state, private is significant. Bank foundations like us, banks do too. We have a really strong, we have a really strong down payment assistance program. We have up to $15,000 in down payment assistance that we're able to offer our borrowers. I've got to shout out OISTA on the call. OISTA has been, I see all you guys, yeah. Grants, lending capital, our HUD counseling. We've consistently had years of relationships to support our HUD programming. And they usually do pair grants with lending capital, which has a real impact. I'll tell everybody else on the call. You can't lend capital if you don't have the systems to do it. So make sure that gets paired with the operating capital required for that. And people call OISTA like intermediaries. So there are other folks like that, NeighborWorks, Rural Lisk. So there are some capacity building and federal monies that go through them and give us the opportunity to access. We just got a capacity building grant with Enterprise where we're going to fully digitize our lending program to meet the increased need, which is probably double deployment within 3 years. But um, so yeah, for this call, I will say everything is precarious. State is precarious, federal is precarious, the intermediary, we say you're doing a great job, but other intermediaries with NeighborWorks and Rural Lisk, like I don't know how they have their Section 4 capacity building grants right now. I don't know where HUD is right now, which is a lot of the funding we get from OISTA. So most of the spaces are pretty precarious in this moment. We're very fortunate to have been around for a long time and been able to raise capital prior to this moment. So it's definitely time for private investment to step up.
Thank you. Other questions, folks? You can raise your hand, put questions in the chat, and then also any thoughts from our panelists?
Yeah, I did see a question in the chat earlier about the wraparound services. I just wanted to touch briefly on that. So the resilient circle model, the thing that JumpScale put together, and thank you, Daniel, for dropping that video link in the chat. It was truly inspiring, right? It's mental health support services, physical health support services, financial development services for Native business owners and entrepreneurs. And it helps to address the needs of the community where they're at, right? It's like if you are trying to get your business off the ground, but you haven't had anybody actually help you sit down, deal with the trauma of money that is floating through the communities, then you're never able to get to that next stage. You get people who are incredibly driven, but haven't had health insurance to be able to talk to somebody, whether it's a psychologist or a therapist or anybody, to just listen to them and get an understanding of what their internal personal blockers are. And then also business support services, right? I was like, well, that's what we're here to do. We're here to make good investments, and we're here to make our community investable, and we're here to build sustainability into it. Well, sometimes folks need help with that. So addressing all of those things together is incredibly helpful and transformative, but it's also incredibly expensive. So not to put too fine a point on it, but trying to do that kind of work means really having to dig deep into personal coffers and support those entrepreneurs to be able to get out there. And the work they do stabilizes their communities, because every living wage job that gets created by a Native entrepreneur, if they hire somebody else from their family, from their community, from down the street, now that's one more person who can afford to take care of their own kids. That's one more person who can, out of the 700,000 or so that are available here in the Northeast, who can make a difference in their community.
If I can just build on that, Alex, a really great point is, so with our Native CDFI support, including program-related investments, we did an evaluation of our PRIs, and we did it from not a quantitative standpoint, but capturing the stories, which really are key. You know, we have the numbers in the background. We can pull that out, but really like hearing the stories around the change. And one of the two major lessons from that evaluation, one was that Native CDFIs and CDFIs altogether really think of their work as looking forward, right, and seeing the possibility and the hope, whereas bank underwriters are looking backward. They're looking at track record and things that probably, don't fit the mold because of systems and structures, not because of individual deficit. And CDFIs are seeing that belief and that opportunity and investing in that with their dollars. And then from a foundation standpoint, one of the things that was really powerful is understanding that our role as investing in change makers, meaning the nonprofits, the Native CDFIs, and others in our region, that by doing that investment, they in turn are investing in change makers, and they're defining the change makers as those business owners, as the artists. I mean, some of the work, I skipped over one of the slides that has this amazing artwork from someone named Sammy Bird, and she started out. She's a enrolled member of the Blackfeet Nation in Montana, and she started out in 2017. She was part of the rodeo, but she was capturing the art of the rodeo, and a small loan to get supplies, $2,000. And now 8 years later, she's selling this amazing work. You'll see it in the PDF of the slides at the end. But that's, invest, and it's tying to culture and land and place, and those investments are just so important. So when I think about sort of that ripple effect just happening at so many levels, it is really transformative, and that is what's creating the new structures and systems that honor people for who they, for their history and who they are, and really center that self-determination. So, and power. A lot of power in this work.
Zach.
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
All right, well, I apologize. For some reason, my camera is on, but not actually showing me from what I can see on my end. But I had a question for Sarah because she brought up an interesting topic about her relationship with the state. And prior to becoming employed here at Owista, I worked for economic development in Wyoming for about 6 months. And, part of that project was actually looking at economic development across the state and meeting with a lot of the different key players. And one of the things I quickly figured out is not once was the reservation spoken about. And here in Wyoming, we have one native CDFI, the Wind River Economic Development Fund. Um, and it was really interesting because they had been awarded this massive EDA grant, which you would think would be a talking point for the state. And so I went to the governor's business forum at the time, right after they're awarded, and not once, was the reservation spoken about. But when this grant award came out, the state's economic development arm were the first ones to kind of say, look what we got, look what happened. And so I'm just curious about, your own relationship there in Maine, and, how you've navigated that.
Ah, love it. Thank you. Okay, so Maine is very unique. I messed up my chat by sending. I want to get a chat for the whole group up, but I don't have it. Travis, I'm going to send you a link if you could put it in the group one because I don't want to spend time figuring out how to do this. Maine is very unique because of the 1980 Settlement Act, so that's something that I was referring to a little bit. But I want to speak to what you're saying because yes. And this happens all the time with tribal nations, not just by the state, right? Like I lived in Washington County for a long time. I saw so many grant applications that said, and this is the way we help the tribes. This is the way we do that. And then it doesn't happen. It's not a real thing. Or like I've seen farms try to get grant money that's saying we're honoring this indigenous farming practice and we're making, no, it's not a thing. That's just like really cool to say. And then it gets you money. So like that's a common practice all over the place. States are pretty bad at it. And so what I got kind of hyped up over, which like, whoever on the call wants to start this study with me, let's do it. But when I first got to Four Directions, there was, what was it? It was through DECD, it was a federal pass-through that goes to the state. Oh, CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Program. Okay, so that's a federal program. The states get money to deploy to communities. And they get there's an equation that says, depending on how many people meet this spec, blah, 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 this is what you get. Native folks are included in that formula, right? Their communities and the people are included in that formula. I did some like on the way to Augusta, writing stuff on a notepad or something, and the state owed the tribal nations $10 million over 35 years. Like that was the truth, right? So the way that the folks are represented in this application, the funding does not get deployed to the communities. Those are truths, right? And that's not okay. I don't know if there are rules against it, but it doesn't pass the straight face test. And the argument that folks will say is that there's a native carve out at the federal level. Cool, but if the tribes don't have the capacity to access it and don't access it, that doesn't mean anything. And if the state is representing tribal people and communities in the way that they receive the money, then they have a moral obligation to make sure that those communities access it. So I think that's where we're going. I'm with you. I'm sure it happens all over. Let's do something about it.
And I think that's a great point, Sarah, because I've seen that too, where on EDA applications, you get bonus points for representing underserved areas. And at times the reservation will be mentioned, but they were never included in those conversations. And so what it is they're speaking for the reservation, saying that this is a community we serve, but in reality, it's not actually, there is no intention behind it. And so it's good to hear that it's not just Wyoming, that other states deal with similar things. So thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak on it.
We have time for about one more quick question. If there are other questions folks have, if they put them in the chat, I will make sure we get answers for you and send them in the email following up after the event. But is there somebody that has a quickish question to ask? Yeah, Dr. Z.
Hi there, and thanks for this information opportunity to share. So we've come from a tribally co-established organization, and one thing that we wrestle with a lot is, what does economic self-determination really mean in this context? And is there a way to really leverage the types of investments you're talking about to create like self-sustaining economic models? Like, will we ever get off this kind of grant cycle, philanthropy cycle, investment debt leverage cycle with the type of initiatives you're talking about? And is there a way to, find that common interest between non-native communities who are also interested in that type of economic self-determination in these times. Maybe not a quick answer, but had to throw it out. Thanks.
So that's a really fascinating one. We just got to tour the Lummi Reservation yesterday, right? We got a wonderful opportunity to go out there and see what had happened and how transformative their CDFI had been in being able to help support a bunch of programs and development. So we went past, it's like, here's where the old building was. It's a double wide parked out back. Here's the new building. It's 7,000 beautiful square feet of incredible works of art. That happens because they start funding things. Now, for this tribe up here, it was casino revenue. And then that got turned into leveraging for fishing fleets. And then that got turned into leveraging for other economic development programs. And so by using, it's like you need just the start. And as soon as you have the first thing, you can use that to build the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And now it's like, I got warned, don't stick your hand in that bucket because it was full of 800 pounds of Dungeness crab. And they were expecting to pull in almost 20,000 pounds of Dungeness that day. That is a huge economic driver, and they're doing it in ways that are both honoring Indigenous practices and sustainable fishing and making sure that those fisheries aren't getting just fished out. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on. This is my direct example from it's fresh on my mind because I saw it yesterday, but it's happening all over the country. And I think as Native communities, one of the things we need to be doing is building towards that ultimate sustainability goal. Part of the CDFIs and our investment, and we touched on it a little bit earlier about risky communities, we need to strip out the idea of natives being risky investments because the risk is already happening. The risk is communities that are destabilized, communities that don't have the capacity to manage that type of economic engine. It's not even a potential risk, it's an everyday reality. So what we do in the Native CDFI world is actually de-risking states, de-risking justice systems, de-risking health systems, de-risking agriculture, supply chain by supporting Native communities in building that sovereignty and that sustainability for themselves. Woo! Soapbox.
Well, with that, it is happening here. I'm so happy that Four Directions and Turtle Island are in my neighborhood and in my region, and so glad that folks like Northwest area are leading from afar. And Thomas, thank you for Sewell and all the work that you guys do. As a reminder, our next webinar is on October 9th from 1 to 2:30. And with that, I'll just ask each of our presenters if you have 15 or 30-second parting words that you want to share with others. Thank you so much for being here. Sarah, Thomas, Nikki, Alex, anything you'd
I'm
like
just
to
gonna
add?
put my email in the chat, and I love this work and would welcome the opportunity to connect with anybody further around it.
Thank you, Sarah.
I'm gonna follow that lead and do the same because I would love to talk further. And I just what Alex was sharing was really powerful there at the end. And I think really encourage people to think about that time equation too. Like it touched on the risk, the narrative around risk, which is really harmful. And then also thinking through this work takes time and patience and trust and flexibility, and just really encourage organizations, funders in particular, to really think about that and unlearn some of the habits that have led to some bad funding practices in the past. Period. End of story.
You, Nikki. Any last thoughts, Thomas?
Thoughts to fit in here at the end, but just what, Alex's last comment really makes me think of, and my sort of investment specific call on this would be to, as you're thinking about investments, I think I put up in our little spectrum graphic that we're talking about, or we think about it at Sewell as moving from extractive to regenerative and really having an eye toward like who's benefiting from the terms of your investment, uh, and thinking carefully about what the needs are of the project that you're investing in and who's um, whether or not the investment and the terms you're looking at are allowing those benefits to return to the communities you're investing in, or they're coming back to you.
And my last comment here is just to say I want to give big thanks to everybody on this call. We mentioned a while ago that a lot of us met at the OESTA conference, the Capital Access Convening. Thank you to our OESTA team that is here in the chat with us. And also next year's CAC is happening up in New England. It will be in Maine. So there's a really good opportunity. Yeah, woo! There's a really good opportunity for building these communities up and then getting to see the direct impacts in place. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Alex, for bringing us together. All right. See you all later. Thank you.